What's up guys, Intellitech Studios here, and today we'll be doing a full in-depth comparison on two almost identical Dysons that directly superseded each other with vastly different designs, but still some similarities. This is the comparison between the Dyson DC14 Telescope Reach series and the Dyson DC15 The Ball series of vacuums. Now, I decided to stick with the yellow just to make the color differences not an obvious eyesore of a difference between the two machines, but we will be doing a full in-depth comparison between these two, as both of these machines, albeit they came out at a very similar time and have identical Cyclones and some other similarities, they have left their legacy on Dyson's design language in different ways that each of them are clearly exemplified. The DC14, it lasted in terms of it being a popular machine that lasted in of itself, in its direct form, for many, many years, even beyond it being commercially or financially relevant for Dyson. Whereas the DC15, despite the actual machine being much more short-lived, or much less short-lived, I suppose would be the correct terminology, it spawned the design language that Dyson uses to this day on all of their upright cleaners, whereas DC14 clearly was not the future, as no Dyson upright that exists now or is even in production tepidly has not a ball design. So, both these machines released at relatively similar times. The DC14 released in November of 2004, the Dyson DC15 released in October of 2005, so there's just about a year between these two machines in terms of them being the newest machine in Dyson's lineup. But, again, despite the fact that DC14 is the slightly older machine, it ended up being commercially relevant for much longer, as it pretty much got right the first time, although it did have problems that were later fixed on other machines like the DC17 and the DC27. As far as the way the consumers felt about the machine, the DC14 was far more popular. It was cheaper, it was generally easier to use and easier to work on, and despite it not having the ball system, it still remains to be very maneuverable for an upright. However, we are going to go into more specifics right now. Starting off with the biggest, most obvious similarity between the two, the Cyclone pack. Now, this Cyclone design debuted on the DC14, and it's a big departure from the previous DC07. It cut down on a lot of the noise complaints from the DC07 because the physical Cyclones are pointed downward to the inside of the Cyclone pack. We also have a design that's a little bit cleaner in terms of a much better handle. That was weird the way I said that, but it looks better. The machine is able to be shorter, and there's a little bit less materials that are physically used on the outside of this. This Cyclone pack is also a lot more durable because there's less hollow, brittle plastic that could potentially be broken from a fall compared to the DC07. We also have a slightly different design in terms of the handle retention. On early DC07s, the handles would actually break and or fall off easily because there wasn't a proper guard. With the DC14, that guard is actually built into the play that you see with the switch whenever you lift the machine by the carry handle, as this also is your carry handle. Now, the actual release button is identical between these two, but they both have had revisions over time. This is a slightly newer button. There was an older button where the button was a little bit shorter, but I'll do a DC14 comparison later on and show you that difference. But generally speaking, these Cyclone packs are virtually identical. Now, for whatever reason, Dyson decided to mute the color on the shroud on the DC15 as a way to differentiate the two Cyclone packs, so you can tell just by appearance, even if the bin has been replaced and the stickers are gone, you can still tell that one is the DC14 and one is the DC15. The 14 has a colored Cyclone and the 15 has a gray Cyclone. And the filters, believe it or not, are also different as well. The tools are also different, which we'll touch on that in a sec, but the actual attachments, or not the attachments, the actual filter is different on these as well. So, on the DC14, when you pop this up, or excuse me, this is the 15. See, that kind of demonstrates how similar these are because I opened these backwards. So this one is the DC14. You can see the differences in the filter. Yes, this one needs replaced. But the DC14 filter, although this isn't, actually, is this original? Oh, this was an original filter, actually. So the original filter will have a diagram on the side explaining to you how to wash it. And it has this little... Sorry, I'm getting distracted from the cat. And this has a plastic piece in the center that the foam pad actually sits into. Sir, I'm trying to do a video. You keep derailing my train of thought. Sorry, brief cat intermission. I love you, Rocco. This is the reason why videos don't get done as often as I'd like them to. It's because this fluffy orange little man just derails every video that I do. You better stop being cute or you're gonna get flopped. I warned you. Flop. Alright, back to this. So, this has this little piece of plastic that sticks out, and you would use this to grab the filter and pull it out of the Cyclone pack. The Cyclone setup is exactly the same, and this Cyclone is actually a really big improvement from the DC07, as it's much more easy to disassemble and a lot more straightforward in terms of its design. Now, the filter, believe it or not, as you can see, are different, and the 14 filter does not fit in the DC15. I mean, it fits, but you can't close it, whereas the DC15 filters do fit in the 14. You can tell this one's very deteriorated. But the reason why is this little bit right here. So on the DC15, they added this little molding mark with a quick... they added this little piece right here that slides underneath the filter latch, and in much of the way that a lot of more premium machines like the Cibo and the Miele uprights don't allow you to shut their bag doors without a bag in place, the DC15, not the 14, although it does have the mark for it, as you can see. The design is the same, but the 15 has this extra piece that does not allow you to close it without the filter in place. So if we take the filter out, see that red little bit actually slides in the way and we cannot close it, at least not easily. Whereas the 14 does not have that in place, although you can add and subtract it from both of these, which if you have a DC15, since you can't get DC15 filters anymore, which makes no sense, I don't know why they didn't just start making these from here on out, and Dyson themselves, now that they've discontinued both of these filters, your only option are aftermarket. And any aftermarket filters that claim to be DC15 are actually this style, which is unfortunate because it means they'll fit in a 14 just fine, but on a 15 they will not fit because the way this is designed, it's designed to actually slide along this piece down here in order to slide in place. And there's not really a good way to force this in here unless you kind of fiddle this out of the way with your fingers, which you can kind of do, but it's really janky. See, there we go. I was able to get it to fit that time. So it takes a little bit of work, but you can replace and swap these filters, but technically speaking, this is a 14 filter. But again, it's strange because this one is just better in every way. It's better for airflow because there isn't that separate piece in the middle, and it's just a better design. But for whatever reason, Dyson decided to change that back. But that's why there are two different filters, despite a virtually identical appearing Cyclone pack. So yeah, the filter, despite being a little bit different, as I mentioned, the pack itself is the same with the exception of that filter and that release mechanism that you saw. Now, even though the actual slots on the top for the tools are the same, the tools are different. It's why you see the 15, since it has a smaller diameter tool set, it's got these little ridges to allow it to still fit in the grooves that they otherwise would fit flush with on the 14. And we'll talk about the tools in a sec. While we've got these off, we'll talk about the HEPA filters. The DC14, despite the pre-motor filter being different, uses the exact same HEPA filter as the DC07. You can even see where the opening is a bit bigger, so the filter sits a bit further in, and the rest of this frame is just hollow plastic on the inside. Now, Dyson theoretically could have given this a bigger filter, and I don't know why they didn't, but I guess the bright side of them not doing that is it means that you can interchange the post-motor filters between the 07 and the 14. And beyond that, it's the same. I mean, as you can see, the pipes are a little bit different, and the 15 has another little guard here to keep debris from getting into the motor. They took debris getting through the motor way more seriously than they did on the 14, both because of that guard that's in place. Oh, I keep around the wrong. Both because of that guard that's in place and this little mesh here. So if any hair did somehow get past the filter in the Cyclone, it would be caught by this guard right here. And that's important because there's a circuit board down here that actually runs the brush roll motor and the relay, and that is actually cooled by the cool clean air that comes out of the Cyclone pack. So it's very important that that remains clean. And thankfully, both of these machines do a fine job of filtration, but the 15 does appear to have a slight edge in that regard. The 15's HEPA filter is also actually part of the housing. This entire top piece is actually built into the filter, and there is no way to separate the two. You actually pop off the entire top piece, and the filter is attached to it. All right, so now that we discussed the Cyclone and the filters and their similarities and differences, we'll move on to the next thing that you notice between the two, the cleaner heads. After all, since this has the ball design, you can't exactly use the same clutch design and cleaner head that you could use on the DC07 and the DC04. With the DC15, we actually have a separate brush roll motor for the first time on a Dyson upright. However, it's not the best design in the world because there is no way to actually remove this cleaner head. That feature wasn't available until the DC18 Slim. So if you have any issues with wiring or with the motor in this design, you don't really have any recourse at repair. The entire thing is permanently attached, and trying to actually disassemble this thing is not pleasant. It's not something I've ever attempted, nor do I ever want to. This machine doesn't exactly have a design that seems to lend itself very well to repairability, which to the credit of the DC14 is much better, even if it is still worse than a lot of more contemporary machines because of the clutch design and a lot of the ways that the machine goes together. So this clutch is actually what drives the brush roll between the two belt system and the clutch that's in the exact shape. Rocco, people need to see the shape of this. But you can see the shape right there. Well, you actually can't see it because there's a cat in the way. But you can see the shape right there where the clutch is. Excuse me. And you can see the shape right there where the clutch is, as you can see where the secondary clutch goes to the brush roll and where the main clutch would go to the motor assembly. You can't physically see it, but you can kind of take, ow, but you can kind of get an idea where it goes. Now, if there's a million videos on YouTube on how to replace these clutches, and you can see how the exact clutch mechanism goes together, but the gist of it is that right here. Rocco, you cannot physically be more in the way than you are right now. I'm trying to show the people the vacuum. Sir. Okay, so there's this little clutch right here. I just realized there's a lot of dirt on this. I need to clean this. So you can see where it's actually marked, where there's carpets and bare floors. Now, when the machine is upright on both of these machines, the brush roll does not engage. That's a safety feature. But on the DC14, whenever the whenever the tab is either on the carpet directly or on the bare floors, the brush roll does not turn. It only turns whenever you recline the machine and the carpet switch slides down, which I'll demonstrate that in just a sec. So if we push this down, we can see that the pedal, come on, you can see that that slides down beyond where the carpet thing is, where the carpet tab is, and now it actually is engaging the brush roller. And you can see where it pushes back up. This one kind of squeaks a little bit. So the clutch system is how this controls the brush roll on the DC14, and that is a wear part. You do need to replace that. The belts are rubber, and they do not last the lifetime of the machine. The entire clutch mechanism is designed to last about 5 years with the original belts, although a lot of times in certain dry climates, they can dry out and stretch out in as little as 2 years, but if you're out in the Midwest around here, they tend to last about 5 years before they really start to see a noticeable decrease in performance. But either way, it still is a wear part, and it's something you got to fix at some point. On the 15, you don't have that problem. Now, if the brush roll motor goes out, you are SOL, but it's not designed to, or at least it's, in theory, not supposed to. Instead, we actually have fingertip controls for the first time on a Dyson upright. We have the brush bar on-off switch, and it always defaults back to the carpet mode whenever you turn the machine back on, just like it does on modern Dysons. Whereas the 14 actually will remember what position you had it in last because it's a physical switch that stays in that position. So that could be good or bad depending on the person. If you don't remember and you don't pay attention to this and you have it on the bare floor mode, you might be wondering why the machine's not picking up. But then on the DC15, if you're turning the machine on and off a lot and yet you're using it on bare floors, you have to deal with the brush roll spinning for half a second before you're able to actually turn off the brush roller. So depending on your usage, either way could be a little bit annoying. Now, Dyson could have implemented a lock system here to physically keep the switch down despite the power, but I understand why they didn't do that, because for a lot of consumers that might have overly complicated the design and made it a bit more difficult to use. This is a lot more straightforward of a design, and as you can see, the power switches are pretty much identical. It's just on the 14 you don't have the extra bit for the brush roller motor, but you can tell they designed it in a way where they'd be able to pretty much reuse the same parts, as the switches and everything are pretty close. Actually, I haven't disassembled the DC15 switch, so I guess I can't comment on how similar the main switch is, but you do have the additional switch for the brush roll, at least. The potato bit me. Anyways, so the next thing we're going to talk about with these designs is the other part of this cleaner head. We mentioned the clutch and the entire sort of brush roll system and how they actually function. But if we actually look at the bottom, the differences do not stop there. First off, I just experienced this in the last 2 seconds. One of the annoying quirks of the DC15 is the floppiness of this cleaner head. For whatever reason, this cleaner head and the entire ball system has a lot of play in it, both when the machine is standing up and when you're trying to pick up the machine. This entire cleaner head drags. And even though the machine isn't all that heavy, it's actually not as heavy as it looks. It still is heavier than the 14, so the weight is a problem. But also, this whole thing just kind of flops around, and it's not exactly sturdy. But the 14 is a lot more sturdy. And I do apologize. I've been using both of these, so I do apologize if they look dirty and dusty. They've just been used. But here's the brush roller on the DC14, and we can see that brush roller. This one actually, I think I probably need to replace this one actually. But we can see there we've got this cylindrical helix design brush roller, and we have the various wheels. We've got 3 wheels up here, which it looks like these 3 are actually completely seized. And we've got these these quarter turn points where you can use a coin to pop off this base plate without any tools and clean up the brush. We also have some piping. We got the U-bend and the lower hose. And on the DC14, the lower hose is what actually acts as the spring. So if this hose goes limp, then the cleaner head is not going to actually attach to the floor properly, as that hose is what's supposed to snap this upwards so that way it maintains contact with the carpet. So if you don't have that hose either be new or be in a condition where it still maintains some of its rigidity, then you will have this not actually maintain contact. You have to physically push your foot on this to squish this down and flatten it out to the floor. So it can be a little bit of a pain. The DC15 does not have that problem, thankfully. After all, it always droops down anyways, and this hose is not part of that design, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Now, the DC15 is vastly different in terms of the brush roller design. We have a wider brush roll with a wider opening, and both of these machines have the large debris channel built into it that was not present on the DC07. It's kind of Dyson's attempt at sort of a wind tunnel technology, but not really. But it works pretty much the same on both units. There isn't a practical difference between the two. Now, the DC15 does do a little bit better at edge cleaning since these edges are actually opened, but these end caps are prone to going bad. So this is a wear part. These end caps and the brush rollers have both been updated over the years. This one's a very early example, but thankfully it's all still in good shape, as these brush rollers and the end caps had a pretty bad habit of stripping out and breaking over time. Now, the good news is that even though the brush rollers you can't get anymore, you can sometimes find generic replacements of the brush rollers, and the end caps are the exact same end caps that you'll find on the DC21. So you can still sometimes find end caps for these, even if they don't color match. But yeah, so this particular machine does thankfully resist hair tangles a little bit better than the DC14, although, as we can see from my prolonged usage of this machine, it still does tangle hair. So both of these are going to need some maintenance to keep the hair off of the brush roller. But yeah, so both of these do tangle, although the 15 does have a stiffer brush, the bristles stick out more, and the overall agitation is far better than on the DC14. The 15 is a much better cleaner in terms of actually cleaning carpets. And both of these machines move very smoothly on floors, but the metal base plate does add a little bit of quality that no other Dyson machine has ever seen. Although for that reason, you can see a droop there, although for that reason I do prefer to use the 14 on bare floors, because the 15, it having a metal base plate, even though it doesn't tend to scratch, it still does concern me in terms of its ability to scratch things. But that is a very unique aspect, is having a metal base plate on a Dyson. You never see that on Dysons, and I don't think we've ever seen that on Dysons outside of this unit. So if you like metal base plates, then this is pretty much your only choice in the Dyson lineup. Now, I do apologize, as I can't directly weigh both of these machines and compare my own weights for these machines to the official spec, as my scale just broke, like literally last night, and I haven't been able to run to the store yet to get a new one because I wanted to get this video done for Wednesday. But trust me, the DC15 is significantly heavier than the DC14, and as you can see, the Cyclone packs, while being the same, because of the ball and everything and all that plumbing, the actual Cyclone pack is higher up on the DC15, so carrying it is a little bit more awkward, and the 15 is ever so slightly taller than the 14 as well, but it's kind of hard to accentuate that because the handles are facing different directions. So the 14 weighs about, I believe 17 pounds is the official weight, and the DC15 weighs not too much heavier, to be fair. I thought it was going to be significantly heavier than the way it feels, but with the cleaner head dragging and everything, it appears to weigh well over 20 pounds. I believe it's about, I want to say it's 21 pounds, but I don't actually remember the official spec off the top of my head. I'll try to remember to add that in the description, but realistically I'll forget because you know me. Anyways, so 15 is substantially heavier, that's the gist of that point, and it's way more awkward to use despite having the ball. And we'll go into the usage real quick of both of these. And we are going to run both these as well, and I'm going to save the best for last, the rant at the end, for the tools, because there is a big rant coming, and those of you that know me know exactly what it's about. So, with the DC14, the way that you'd use it is, if you're trying to use it in the upright position, you can put your foot on either side of the front of the nozzle, or if your nozzle's getting stuck after a while, you can put it in the middle to pull it down, which is usually the way I prefer to do it, just so it's not putting uneven pressure on it, because both these machines are getting very brittle these days, in most instances, especially if you have an older model, and you don't want any issues with either of these. Now, again, if you have a hose that doesn't have this tension to it, you'll have to push that down. But pushing and pulling the machine, especially with this original handle, is very easy to do. The entire machine is very streamlined, and the weight is balanced very well. The actual handle weight is very, very low on these Dysons, despite them being not extremely light cleaners. They're not heavy, don't get me wrong, but 17 pounds is pretty average. So these machines are significantly easier to use in the hand, especially than a lot of the Sharks that you'll see that tend to physically weigh the same but are way heavier in the hand. And even more premium machines like the Cibo, Dart, and Felix also have way increased handle weight compared to this machine. This machine is very easy on the wrist, and it's just a very well-balanced machine. And despite it not having a ball, because of the fact that the wheels are very smooth and the entire middle section of the machine basically pivots on the floor, you've got a very easy to maneuver cleaner. So even though it doesn't have a ball, you can still twist it around corners pretty effectively, and it's surprisingly nimble compared to a lot of other machines. Now, the DC15 aims to remedy that even further by having a physical turning point. And the ball machines, I've always maintained, which no reviewer ever seems to mention this, but I've always maintained that the ball machines are actually the best swivel necks that you can get on a machine, because their design allows the machine to turn in the direction that you're turning it. The swivel neck isn't independent of the rest of the machine. On a Dyson, it's entirely built in to the actual body, so which I know that sounds weird the way I'm describing it, but if you used it, you would see what I'm saying. It's turning the entire machine in the direction. It's not a separate neck that simply turns and you just hope the machine goes in that direction. Now the ball, of course, because this is the first iteration, it is also the worst iteration. You've got this very very large kickstand that you have to basically physically push down and back with your foot, which can be a little tricky if you're not used to it. And it's way more complicated than the modern system, but most customers tend to prefer a physical button to release instead of the quick release that's been on these machines since the DC41. The entire kickstand pulls back, and now you have a lot of the weight of the machine kind of pulling down on your wrist. Not as bad as some other machines still, but still much worse than the 14 because you don't have those wheels that it's sitting on. So this whole thing kind of pulls itself back. And this handle is also garbage, and I'll rant about that more in a sec when we talk about the tools. But this handle on this unit, which here in the United States, this is the most common handle that we got, is garbage, and it's way worse than the backwards handle that was later fitted to the DC14. But again, we'll talk about that in a sec. So you're basically having to hold it right here with your hand basically against the wand. And, you know, you can still turn it pretty effectively. To be fair, I have gotten used to this handle, but it's still not all that pleasant. You feel the entire cleaner head drag, and it makes it feel like it's not getting the best contact, which is probably the reason why, even though this is, in theory, a much better cleaner and the brush roll is way better designed, it still doesn't clean nearly as well as any modern Dyson ball upright, like the, you know, UP13, UP20, and the Animal 3. This machine just doesn't clean as well. It simply doesn't. And it does have a swivel neck, which does make it twist and turn effortlessly around corners, even in this first-gen iteration. The problem is that you have so much weight behind it that it's not really practical, and you don't want to do it all the time necessarily. But the fact that you can is still very impressive. And in some ways, you can still get underneath areas, kind of, although the piping does get in the way. That was later solved with the DC41. But overall, it's still a much more awkward machine. And just like the 14, you put it in the upright position, except the wheels slam down, and you kind of got to hold it forward for a sec for it to kind of pop down, and then now the thing is stable. And there is a little bit of play in the machine, but it's still much less play than on the modern ball Dysons because of these very thick, protruding wheels. So there is a piece of credit there that I'll give to the OG ball. Now, as far as when you're using the machine, again, using the machine is virtually identical. The only difference primarily is that you've got fingertip controls for the brush roll. So whenever you have the machine reclined and you're using the brush roll, you can push this button to turn the brush on and off, and that turns it off respectively. Whereas on the DC14, you've got that little switch down there, which if we zoom in on that, you can see it's on the carpet mode. Now, in theory, you can actually use your foot to pop this back and push it forward, which you can do, although it is a little awkward and you gotta use a good amount of force. If you're the type of person who wears shoes indoors, which unfortunately I've been bestowed with the curse of often wearing my shoes indoors, then it makes this process a lot easier than if you only have socks or are barefoot. I'm doing it okay now, but it is a bit uncomfortable when your foot drags along the hard plastic. And it's really not that pleasant to do. So a lot of times, most people that I've seen will actually bend down and twist it, which gives you a lot more leverage, but it's also not as ergonomic. Dyson designed it to where you can do it with your foot, but it is a little bit uncomfortable. So that being said, it still doesn't require you necessarily to bend down, but you don't have the fingertip controls of the DC15. Now we talk about my number one complaint with the DC15. And the worst part about it is it's a complaint that shouldn't even exist because it didn't need to. For whatever reason, Dyson took the very nice handle on the DC14. And in the UK, this is the only handle that they got. And here in the US, this is the most common handle you're going to find. There was a brief time when they swapped parts with the DC17, and you could get DC14s for a little bit, and sometime around 2007, where you could get them with the handles that would face backwards, like on the DC17 and the DC18, whenever those machines were out. And that handle was still very nice because it actually curved upwards, so that way whenever you had the machine reclined, it was parallel with the floor. Now, for whatever reason, Dyson US decided to take the DC14 handle, which in the UK was identical but only had an extra reinforcement piece, and they decided to flip it around for some reason. And unlike on the later DC17 and DC18, where this handle is curved upwards, so it actually curves with your hand, this handle is curved downwards, which means even when you're holding it upright, you have to hold your hand like this instead of like this, which means when you're holding your hand like this and you go to recline the machine, now you're bending your arm, and you're putting a lot of strain on your arm and on your wrist. So if you hold this handle the way it's designed, you are bending your wrist and your arm, and so it's basically forcing you to vacuum with your hand almost all the way forward, except that engages the kickstand, so it's a terrible design. So the way you actually have to hold it is with your hand shoved all the way up against the edge of this with a lot of strain right there, and you have to hold it like this, which means that this little mark right there that you would normally put your thumb is useless. This handle is awful, and those of you who have these in the UK, you never got this handle, and be thankful that you didn't, because you got your original handle and you only ever got that. Literally, it's this exact same handle, but just flipped the other way. So if this was flipped that way, this would be a good handle, but it's not, because they flipped it this way, and they didn't put any effort into re-engineering it. Except they did, because they put the effort into flipping it in the first place and redoing the mold and redesigning it to sit this way. I don't understand why Dyson US did this, and it's the biggest problem with the DC15. They went out of their way to make the handle significantly worse, and it completely kills the ergonomics and the usability of the machine, which is insane because Dyson usually excels at ergonomics and handling. So the experience of using the DC15 as an upright is completely neutered, whereas on the DC14, it's very comfortable. This handle is designed very well, and it balances the machine very well, and it's just very good. On the 15, it's not. And again, there technically does exist a version of the 15 in the States that has the UK's forward-facing handle, but they didn't make it for very long because they pretty much flipped the handle around right as they were discontinuing the DC15. So good luck finding one with that handle, unless you, of course, import one from the UK, which is just frankly not worth doing. So, especially with the tariffs. So, yeah, this is not a good design, and whatever person greenlit this at Dyson and went out of their way to suggest this, because this wasn't the thing in the UK, I really hope they don't have a job. So anyways, another issue with this, for whatever reason, on the DC15, and I've seen so many people get this wrong, the DC14 and the DC15 do not share the same tools. Though they also do not share the same wands. The hoses are different, and the hoses are not interchangeable. They are entirely different parts. The 14 has this design right here with the cord clip built into it, and you've got the hose. This part is pretty similar to a DC07. This DC15 has a hose that is part of the U-bend assembly. So instead of them having a separate U-bend, they built the bend into the hose, which actually is kind of smart, because it means if you have a clog here, you can pull it out this way or pull it out this way. So that actually is pretty decent. And while we're on the subject, you do have the same airway inspection port on the 14 as the 15. It's not physically the same part, but it works the same way, where you can pop this valve out and check for any blockages. Ooh, that's gross. So, on the DC15, you've got a much narrower diameter hose, which means finding replacements is much more difficult. You don't have aftermarket parts for these. This also means that it's more prone to clogging, much more prone to clogging, and it also causes the machine to whistle a lot more because the air path is severely restricted. So again, the DC14 has an 1.25 inch fitting, so this actually is a universal fitting, and the tools fit on here, both on the wand and on the hose. They fit on the wand and the hose the same as each other in the same way, but the tools are different. So this, you actually can put universal 1.25 inch tools on the wand if you want to, and if you had a stub tube, you could do it on the hose as well. On the DC15, first off, because this is a smaller diameter, that means that you've got your own proprietary wand cap, your own proprietary handle, your own proprietary hose. None of those are interchangeable with the 14 for no reason. You've also got a shorter, stumpier button for no reason, so it's a little bit more awkward to pull the wand out because you have a shorter button. And as you can see, trying to pull the wand out with the very tiny wand cap, it constantly gets in the way, so it's constantly dragging when you're trying to pull the wand out, and the whole thing just feels like it's stuck in there, whereas on the 14, it slides up way more smoothly. Now, to be fair, with this machine, this does share attachments, an attachment fitting with the DC21 stowaway and a lot of the Dyson canisters, and you can, in a pinch, because these tools are proprietary, they're only for the 15, But that means that if you have tools for your DC21, they can fit on here. They might not fit on the machine, but they'll fit on here. And the newest generation Dyson attachments friction fit on to the DC15. So let's check out the tool usage on both of these machines. Starting out with the DC14, you remove the cord, which you have to do on both of these, which I don't mind, but some people tend to not like. You remove the cord, and then if you want to put a tool on the end of the wand, you would flip up the wand cap, you would pick your desired attachment, put it on the wand, you pull the wand up until it clicks into place, then you push the button, and now the wand with the tool is out, and now you can use it. Get up into corners, do whatever. Now, this particular hose has 17 feet of reach, so it can get pretty much up an entire flight of stairs. Then when you're done, you put the thing back in, you grab your tool, put it back on the machine, at least if it is an onboard attachment, and then what you do is you press the button again, but you press it twice. So there's actually a second level of click, and you push it so it clicks all the way, then the wand slides right down, and you flip the cap down. Now, if you want to use the hose, which will demonstrate that in a sec, that requires an extra little step. For the 15 for the wand, again, similar story. Flip up the wand cap, pull the wand out a little bit, which is a bit more awkward, grab your desired attachment, put it on the end of the wand, which it doesn't seem to fit as snugly on there, and it's not as easy to do with one hand. But put your attachment on, pull it all the way out, remove the cord that you forgot to do earlier, which also has these two cord hooks down here, so it's a little bit more awkward to pull the cord off, but it is built into the machine, not into the hook like the 14. Now, again, same story. You press the button, and now you've got your attachment. Now, it's a little bit more awkward to use it on the 15, but you can either grab it right here, or you can flip it this way and grab it right here. Once you're using the tools, the handle being backwards isn't really as big of a deal because you're pretty much holding it the same way. And again, you got the same, almost the same amount of reach, although not quite. The hose doesn't quite get as long as on the 14 for whatever strange reason. Then when you're done, you grab the tool, put it on the machine, press the button to the second level again, just like on the 14, slide the wand down, and clip it back down. Now let's use the hose on the DC14. So if you don't want to use the wand, there's technically two ways you can remove the wand. You can either pull out the wand like we did before, pop it out, and then press these two buttons to remove the hose. That's the easiest way. Now, there's also another way where when you have the wand in place, you can instead push the buttons immediately, pull the hose down a bit, and then pull the wand out like that. Either way is equally valid, but when you put the wand in this way, you'll have to hold the wand cap to make sure that the wand doesn't slide out, and you go to slide it back in, and you click that in, and put it back down. So either way is the same. So, we're going to pop the hose off, and now any of your desired attachments, whether onboard or external accessories, can be put directly on the hose. Now, this is an 1.25 inch fitting, but much like the Hoover wind tunnels, it fits over the attachment, not into it. So a lot of attachments won't fit unless you find a stub tube that works with this, which there isn't one officially, but there do exist, I'm sure, some third-party ones that would work. But it is still 1.25 inch, so it's much easier to work with that. Now, we'll put this back, and I'll show you the process on the 15. All right. So now if we look at the 15, again, it's very similar. Again, you can remove the wand in the same two ways that you would on the 14, so we're not going to go through that again. So we're just going to pop the wand off. And now, again, any of your attachments, whether they're old school Dyson or new school Dyson, can fit on the hose, although be wary that some of the newer Dyson attachments don't actually fit all the way on the hose, so they do whistle sometimes, and that is unfortunate because in theory you can use new Dyson attachments without any sort of adapter, but they don't really fit all the way. There's like a ridge in there that it just can't quite clear, which is really frustrating. Whereas on the 14 you can simply get an adapter. But at least your onboard attachments will fit properly, and you can put them on all the way, although you got to be careful. The crevice tool has a little ridge there, so if you don't put it in a way that covers that ridge, it's going to whistle. Now, people don't like the crevice tools on both of these machines. I actually do quite like them. And again, these attachments in terms of functionality are identical to each other. So your opinions on the upholstery tool, the dusting brush, and the crevice tool from either of these machines are identical, with the only exception being whatever weird quirks can come up from the difference in the size of the fittings. So again, the 15 has that smaller hose, and it is more likely to clog. And whenever you put the wand back, again, it's the exact same as on the 14. You slide it back in, although it tends to, because of the fact that this hose swivels down here, makes it a little bit more awkward to put the wand back in. But to be fair, one advantage of that is even though both these machines follow you equally as well, since you can pull the 15's hose down, and you can even pull it down and lock it into place, you can actually kind of make it follow you a little bit better than the 14, but they're pretty similar. There's not really a big difference, but in theory, this one you can lock the hose down and drag the machine behind you, because sometimes the lock does, as you can see, pop back up, but it does still have that as an option, which is pretty neat, because really, again, no other Dyson has that. The 15 has a lot of quirks that no other Dysons have, which is pretty fascinating. So, that's it. Those are all the differences, all the similarities and differences between the 2004 Dyson DC14 and the 2005 Dyson DC15. And again, both these machines were later replaced with newer versions. The DC15 Ball series has still machines that are made in the Ball lineup today, although they are vastly different than the DC15. And the DC14, for a while, did have newer iterations like the DC33 that, again, much like the original DC14, ran for a long time, but didn't have as many spin-offs. So the DC15's design has been significantly more updated and changed over the years, whereas the 14, at least from what Dyson seemed to say, was pretty much right the first time. So, but again, they both have their flaws, like a lot of Dysons do, and both of these still pale in comparison in terms of performance and even durability compared to a newer Dyson upright, but these machines do have their place in Dyson history, and for a lot of people, either of these machines would make a fine addition to their collection. For me, the DC14 easily takes the cake. If I want to use a ball Dyson that badly, I'd rather just use a more modern one personally, like a UP13 or a UP30. And the DC14, however, is my favorite of all of the fixed-wheel Dyson uprights, with the partial exception of the Dyson DC27, which is a good machine, but I'm hesitant to use because parts are not available for that machine and haven't been for a long time. Out of the clutch-based Dysons, the DC14 is my favorite of the ones that appear in the US. If I extended it to the ones that also existed in the UK, then I might best the DC14 to the previous generation DC04, which will get a comparison video at some point in the future since I do have one. Anyways, this video has gone on long enough, 45 minutes almost, 42 minutes and 37 seconds. I hope you enjoyed every second of it. You probably didn't, but feel free to dislike this video if you didn't like it. Feel free to like it if you did like it. And be sure to subscribe to Intellitech Studios for more videos like this. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any experience, questions, or comments about the DC14 and DC15, and even other Dysons, be sure to drop those in the comments below. The more comments you leave, the better the algorithm picks up the video, which my videos have not been doing very good recently, so that's all good. But anyways, if you stuck around to the end, I greatly appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting. Anyways, Intellitech Studios signing out. Have a good one. Peace. Let me know what videos you want to see next.